Hello and welcome back to White Collar Woker. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about the problem of David Icke. Now, I'm not going to go into whether or not I believe his actual beliefs are real or not. This video is about the way that the mainstream media and social media deals with David Icke. So the first thing is David Icke's theory of the world being illusionary. Now, I'm going to show a clip of one of the more balanced interviews from this morning, where he makes a point about the world being an illusion. So check it out.
Because now I'm seeing the world in a completely different way. Before, there were puzzle pieces all over the floor. Now, suddenly, I can see how they fit together. And I spent the last 25 years putting them together.
So, what is your puzzle like? What does it look like?
The five senses decode, the ear's a classic, but it's the same with all of them. They decode waveform information, energetic information. Think of it as the wireless internet. The five senses turn that information from waveform into electrical information, same information, different form, which is communicated to the brain. So, for instance, if I bang my shin, I don't say ouch until that message has got to the brain. And the brain takes that information from the five senses and it constructs reality. And therefore, we are living in an illusory reality in terms of solidity. That's why that table, which seems so solid, is made of atoms, and atoms have no solidity. As someone brightly said, if you take an atom to be the size of a cathedral, the nucleus of the atom is about the size of a 10-cent piece. Everything else is empty space. How can that make the solid world? It's not solid.
The problem with a lot of television presenters is that they lack a philosophical understanding and they don't know the basics of history, statistics or economics in order to debate him. So instead what they do is just shut him down. They instantly think he's mad and they instantly paint him as a crackpot, despite the fact that David Icke is not original in this point. He's not the first one to... The first person that came up with that idea was Plato and his allegory of the cave. Now bear with me because it's important you know this. So the allegory of the cave goes like this. I want you to join me on a thought experiment. Imagine if I am chained up in a cave. Now, don't get too excited, all right? Imagine that I have chains and I can't move my head and I'm just looking at the wall of a cave. Now, imagine there's a big bonfire behind me and the light spills on into the wall. Now, imagine there's people walking behind me. All I see are shadows on the wall. Now, Plato's point was that that is like reality. Reality is like the shadows on the wall. And the job of the philosopher was to break the chains, escape up into the real world and see the real world as it was. Now, that idea is the start of something called dualism. You don't need to remember this, but the idea of dualism is that the world isn't just matter. It's not just me, the rock, the world, astronomy. There's also another plane that isn't matter. This is a philosophical expression of a religious idea, the idea that God isn't of this world. They're the same thing, just expressed in a different way. But let's go a step further, because we've doubted our senses. Let's question whether or not we actually exist. And another philosopher came up with a phrase that deals with this question, and most people would have heard of it. It's called I think, therefore I am. But most people don't understand the context and history behind that thought. So the person that came up with that thought was a guy called Descartes. Now, Descartes used to take long meditation sessions in a hot sauna. So he'd sit there sweating his balls off in a sauna. And he came up with a thought experiment. And the thought experiment is that there is an evil entity, a demon, let's call him the devil, controlling all of Descartes' thoughts, controlling his touch, his smell, what he hears. And in that scenario, if the devil is controlling your mind, you can't trust any of your senses. The only thing you know is that you exist. And the reason you know that is because the devil can't actually control the process of thinking. You still have control of the act of thinking. And in conclusion, I think, therefore I am. Up to this point, David Icke completely agrees with both Descartes and Plato. The problem is, I wish television presenters knew that history, because if they knew up to that point, they would probably then know the next 400 years of philosophical thought, which is the answer in the answer to David Icke's point. There's about 300, 400 years of philosophers arguing with each other, which we don't need to go into now. The next important point for David Icke is that someone comes along called Karl Marx. And Karl Marx packages up his thinking into a political movement. So Marx believed that you could see the world through the lens of oppressor and oppressed. He called it the proletariat, but it's really the oppressed, the workers and the capitalists. But Marx, importantly, disagreed with Descartes and Plato. He believed that the world was just matter. There's no other reality, it's just matter. It's called materialism. And if he wanted to change reality, what he had to do was change the economic relationship between the masters and the oppressed. So change the economics. What modern thinkers like David Icke have done is they've combined Marxist theory of the oppressor and oppressed, and then they've added their own twist in that not only is that the case, but the world is an illusion. Now, Marx would have disagreed with David, and Marx would have believed that the table is real, but they actually have the same political thought process and economic thinking, but the only difference is that Marx would have believed that the table would have existed, whereas David doesn't. Now, why am I making a video about this? The main point is that the mainstream media, and in this case the presenters of Good Morning, they lack the philosophical, economic, political and historical understanding in order to have a basic debate with David Icke about whether or not a table exists or not. This means that the media don't know how to deal with him, so what they do is they invite him onto their show and they just ridicule him, they just completely take the piss out of him. I'm not going to go into whether or not I believe David Icke's ideas are real. That is a very, very basic overview of David Icke's philosophical and political overview of the world. Our public discourse is this has really important ramifications on our public discourse. We're not able, and we don't have the level of education in order to have basic existential metaphysical discussions. And because we're not able to do that, we don't understand where the other person is coming from. David Icke is a real extreme character, but he's indicative of the fact that we're not able to have proper discussions in this society. Thought that was a very interesting point. Please like and subscribe. New videos coming out whenever I decide to do them. Also sign up to the book being released in 2021. See you guys later. Whew. Glad we got through that one.